Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Duffy Aquatics. In this episode, I'm talking about Indian lace fern, also known as water sprite. So right here, I have a small water sprite plant growing into rockwool fiber in a pot for sale. These are one of the best plants that aren't being talked about enough. You'll hear mainly in the US. In Australia, it's probably not as popular. Water sprite isn't seen that often in a lot of aquariums. It's really good for someone who's lazy or someone who's trying to breed fish, because you can leave it to float or you can plant it into the substrate. And if I was to get a bunch like I've got sitting here, so if I got this, I pulled it out and oh oopsie, I snapped off a leaf. So like this, excuse my pretty white nails, my fiance is learning how to do them. You'll see this part that's broken off and it's been floating for a little while has sent out roots. So they're one of the unkillable plants. So it's not mentioned a lot as a beginner plant. I think it should be up there with things like Java fern, Java moss and Anubias. It's one of the easiest things to grow. If you've left it to float at the surface, you'll see it starts to actually send up the little fern fronds up out of the water. So if you're trying to do an immersed paludarium styled tank, you can get some really good results using this one as well. It's not picky for its water requirements. I mean, it's sitting here in rockwool fiber. If you don't know, rockwool fiber has 0 nutrients to it, and I'm terrible at fertilizing my tanks. There is CO2 coming into this tank, but if I had it in a tank without CO2, it would still be growing great guns. So over here, now that I say it, I probably won't be able to find any because I've just cleaned out the duckweed. No, I do have some. So I've got this one that's just been floating off the top. It was a piece of a leaf that broke off as I was potting some up, and you can see how extensive the root system is. Just pop it into there and you can see it dangles down. So the added benefit of having something like this, if you're trying to breed fish, if you're trying to breed something like a rainbow fish, a killifish, assuming it's one of the clown killies or gardener killies, or even dwarf pea puffers, this plant is going to be a godsend for you, because you can have it in a small tank like this, have a big plant in there just floating, similar to what's floating behind these guppies in their breeding setup, and they'll lay their eggs in there, and it will also screen out some of the light. So if you've got pea puffers, like I've got hiding at the back there, taking care of a snail problem for me, they're absolutely adorable if you've never seen them. They will lay their eggs in the root systems, and then you can actually either pull out all the fish, or you can pull out the plants themselves, move them into an adjacent tank, and then let the eggs hatch out. So that's a little hack you can do with using water sprite instead of a spawning mop. And it will also help keep the water free of ammonia, nitrates and nitrites, because Indian lace ferns are hungry when it comes to nutrients in the water column. So you can see it just growing. It's been floating there for a few weeks because I haven't got around to potting it up, and it's absolutely fine doing that. So if you're trying to aquascape and you break some off, just leave it to float, you'll have more plants. It's just that simple. When it comes for lighting for the Indian lace fern, I recommend between 5 and 8 hours as a minimum. If you have over that, that's fine too, but just be aware, if you're setting up new tanks, quite often having excessive amounts of light will lead to a huge algae bloom, whether it be murky water or hair algae growing throughout the tank. So a good starting point is that, 4.5, 5 to 8 hours in a day of light for these. If you've only got a small tank with one plant and a few fish, you could probably get away with less light. But if you're doing a big planted tank like this, I'd definitely do a little bit more. They are pretty tolerant for a wide range of light, whether it be a high light or like a lower light. So you'll see the one up here is growing underneath duckweed. So the duckweed is actually screening out a lot of light for the one up there, and it's still growing quite well. This jungle mess here is actually all Indian lace ferns here that I've got a pot up as well. Again, you can see the duckweed is covering the surface, filtering out a lot of light, but they're sending the fronds up through there anyway. So their lighting requirements aren't that extensive for Indian lace fern, so they're a really good starting plant for someone who's not going to be able to remember to turn on the lights for X amount of hours or whatever. So I hope you enjoyed this mini overview of Indian lace ferns. If you have any questions, would like to leave a like and a comment, that would be absolutely great. I am a qualified horticulturalist, so if my videos are missing key bits of information that you'd like to know, please let me know.